Hello everyone, it's time for us to go and take a look at the Samsung Galaxy Note 9 and see how this particular phone holds up in 2025. Now there's a couple of things I definitely want to get out of the way. Number one, it was a really good phone when it first came out, but keep in mind this phone is a little bit older now, so it might start showing its age just a little bit. So that might be one thing to kind of keep in mind there for the most part. Number two, there might be some other phones that I would recommend buying this year before you go ahead and pick up this one. So we'll take a look at all these things throughout this whole entire video. But first things first, if you do want to go ahead and pick up some of these phones that I would recommend buying this year, links will be down in the description below. You can get them from there and you can help support the channel at the exact same time. Now, starting off with the outside of the Galaxy Note 9. This phone originally came out in 2018, so it's about a 7-year-old phone now, which is so crazy because when this phone first came out, it was a pretty good upgrade coming from the Galaxy Note 8. And I remember when the Note 10 came out, a lot of people actually reminisced on this phone and wished this phone would have come back, including myself. With the Note 9 on the exterior, the front side of this phone is giving you a 6.4-inch 1440p Super AMOLED display. This is a pretty good panel for a 7-year-old phone. Like for a 7-year-old phone that came out in 2018, this thing looks really good. It was a very, very big display at the time. You're getting a thin bezel at the sides, but you're getting a pretty big bezel in today's standards on the top and bottom. And I remember when this phone originally came out, I honestly would never think that this would be an old looking phone. But nowadays you can see there's a lot of things here. One, most phones that come out nowadays, they basically don't necessarily look like this. You know, they kind of look a little bit more modern. So because of that, this phone does show its age a little bit there. But also because of its lack of 120Hz refresh rate, because the panel itself isn't really that bright, you are definitely going to be getting a phone here that definitely shows its age. It's going to be looking a little bit older. And that's just kind of what ends up happening here for the most part within these types of devices. So, in my opinion, and that is something that's really, really important to kind of think about here as well. Now, on top of that, you're essentially going to be getting a USB Type-C port at the bottom of this particular phone, which is always really nice to have. I love USB-C, and you're going to be getting that here on this type of phone as well. You're going to be getting a headphone jack too, which that in and of itself is very surprising, and you're getting an S Pen as well. So going through getting an S Pen, getting a microSD card slot, and getting USB Type-C is just amazing. I love having that type of capability. And that is, once again, in and of itself, a really, really nice thing to have inside of your device if you're going to go through and kind of pick it up. So in terms of that, I definitely do think on the front side, the I/O, it's a really nice type of device. On the back side, you're going to be getting a phone that's giving you that fingerprint sensor on the back. You're going to be getting a glass back as well, which looks very good. And it still is like a very premium looking device. Like I said before, I do think if you are going to go through and, for the most part, get these types of devices, these things still look very good. They still perform very, very well. There's not really too much to complain about here on the exterior. The only thing I would really kind of think about here is that with the Samsung Galaxy Note 9, this type of device does kind of show its age when it comes down to the lack of a frosted glass back, the bigger amount of bezel on the top and the bottom, and the lack of a high refresh rate inside of this phone. Other than that, compared to a lot of other flagships that even come out this day and age, this thing looks very good and it still feels like a very premium device when it comes down to it from that side. So from that side, that kind of covers it up there for the most part. Now on top of that, when it comes down to the camera side, this phone is essentially going to be giving you this a dual camera setup on the back side. I always think it's a triple camera, but it's a dual camera setup. It's a 12 megapixel wide angle camera and then a 12 megapixel telephoto lens. Now with this type of camera, the biggest thing you're going to have to remember here is that within these types of devices, these types of cameras, these types of layouts still perform pretty decently. So this thing is giving you a 4K at 60 lens on the back. And interestingly enough, it's giving you a dual camera setup on the front side. It's a 12 megapixel wide and then a 12 megapixel, iris scanner. So it is kind of interesting. It's not really every day that you see a phone like this that gives you that type of, capability, but this one was. So that was kind of a cool thing going on for this type of phone. Now, there are a few things you're going to have to keep in mind here if you're going to go through and pick up one of these types of phones. Number one, the biggest thing you're going to have to remember is that with something like a Galaxy Note 9, this type of camera is a little bit outdated. So number one, the biggest thing you're going to have to keep in mind here is that with the Note 9, this type of device, no 4K at 60 on the front, only 1440p on the front, no ultra-wide camera, which is really surprising. You would expect to have an ultra-wide camera inside of these types of phones. Unfortunately, you are not getting that type of capability here. So that right there is going to be somewhat of an annoying thing you might actually end up running into here. So again, it's not the biggest deal in the world, but that could just be one other thing you might end up running into here within this type of device. So it's not the biggest deal in the world, but that will just be one other thing you're going to have to keep in mind here within this type of device. Now, on top of that, when it comes down to software longevity, this is probably my biggest gripe with this phone, and this is probably the biggest problem you're going to be having inside of this phone as well. So number one, within this type of device, you're definitely going to be getting a phone that not only is showing its age, but because of its software, it's not getting any more security updates, no more software updates. You're stuck in a situation where you're going to go through and buy this phone, and it's not really going to be giving you like that much more software updates or software experience ahead of it. And I would hate for you to go through and buy a phone like this if it's already outdated with software, if it's already not really going to be a device that's going to last that much longer, right? This phone just doesn't really make a lot of sense to go and buy from that particular situation. And like I said, I just think there might be better options out there for you rather than this type of phone. So definitely from a software perspective, that's a big no-no for me. On top of that, 4,000 mAh battery, which is actually a pretty big size battery still, but the problem here is because this is like a 7-year-old phone and it's showing its age so much, you're going to be stuck in this situation where this device, at its price tag and at its everything, like it's going to be at like less than 4,000. It's probably going to be closer to like 3,500 or like 3,000 mAh, which is much smaller than you'd probably want because of battery degradation. So that right there's another really big kind of takeaway to keep in mind here too. And then finally, when it does actually kind of come down to its performance, the performance of this phone was always like pretty decent. With its 2018 chipset, it had that Qualcomm Snapdragon 845 chip inside with 6 gigs of RAM, but you could tap it out at 8 gigs of RAM. The model I had did have 6. And what I can tell you from my personal opinion with this phone was that it really isn't a terrible performing phone. It is obviously a little bit older nowadays, like it does show its age in that standpoint, but I will still tell you, if you're going to go through and like pick up a phone, these things are actually pretty solid. Like I like being able to go through and buy these types of phones and give you that type of capability because these phones do hold up very, very well from that standpoint. So I've always felt like that was a very interesting thing to kind of keep in mind here. So the performance itself is not terrible, I don't know what I'm saying, but there could be some issues if you're going to go through and pick up this phone and if you're expecting it to like be like a really fast performing device still, because it's definitely not going to be in that situation for the most part. So in my personal opinion, looking at this phone as of this point, I will definitely say this device is a very interesting phone. It looks good, it kind of still feels pretty good, but there are way better devices out there for the price than this phone. I think buying a phone like a Samsung Galaxy S23 is pretty much kind of the bare minimum I would recommend nowadays, or a Google Pixel 8 or an iPhone 14 Pro. Those types of phones I think are very good phones. They're, probably around that 300 plus price tag, but they are very good options. And I would recommend going down that direction before you actually go through and buy something like a Samsung Galaxy Note 9. This phone doesn't make any sense to go and buy anymore. Like I said, I think it makes a lot more sense to go and buy something like a 2023 or 2022 or newer phone. So in terms of that kind of covers it up there. If you have any other thoughts or questions, please let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that will mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.